Welcome to Have You Read It, the channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Today we're tackling a weighty topic, economic growth, as explored in Daniel Susskind's Growth, a History and a Reckoning. This book isn't just for economists. It's a sweeping exploration of growth's past, its troubling present, and its uncertain future, relevant to anyone living in today's world. Susskind begins by highlighting three defining facts of human economic history. First, for most of our existence, economic life was stagnant. Hunter-gatherers in the Stone Age and laborers in the 1700s faced a similar struggle for subsistence. This long stagnation lasted for about 100,000 years, with very little change in living standards. Evidence for this stagnation comes from various sources, including English wage data going back to 1209, which shows a flat trend until a sudden takeoff around 1800. Similar trends are seen globally, according to subsistence ratios calculated by Robert Allen. Global GDP per capita, as assembled by Angus Maddison, reinforces this picture of stagnation until 1800. Biological measures like life expectancy and human height further corroborate the long stagnation, showing dramatic increases only after 1800. Studies of ancient remains and historical life expectancy data push the evidence of stagnation further back in time. Anthropologist Richard Lee's studies of hunter-gatherer societies, while not perfect replicas of ancient life, offer insights into the living standards of our distant ancestors, suggesting that they might not have been worse off, and perhaps even better off in some respects, than people in the early 1800s. The second fact is that this stagnation ended only recently, about 200 years ago, a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of human history. The third is that this growth, unlike earlier spurts, has been sustained. Susskind argues that the pursuit of growth, now a central focus of our lives, has brought both triumphs and challenges. While it has lifted billions from subsistence and fueled extraordinary discoveries, it has also come at a cost. Environmental destruction, cultural loss, inequality, and technological disruption. This creates a dilemma. Growth's promise pulls us toward more, while its price pushes us away. The book is divided into 5 parts. Part 1 explores growth's origins, the long stagnation, its sudden end, and economists' attempts to understand it. Contrary to popular belief, the pursuit of growth wasn't always a priority. It gained prominence almost accidentally. It wasn't until the 1930s that we even had ways to measure economic growth, like GDP. Part 2 examines how growth became a priority, linked to many measures of human flourishing. This fortuitous correlation cemented its importance. Part 3 explores the price of growth, its negative impacts. 2 common responses to this dilemma are discussed: GDP minimalism, tinkering with how we measure GDP, and degrowth, intentionally slowing our economies. Susskind argues that neither of these is sufficient. Parts 4 and V offer his solutions, unleashing more growth while simultaneously changing its nature to mitigate its negative impacts, and then confronting the inevitable trade-offs. Chapter 1 focuses on the long stagnation. Susskind emphasizes the similarity in economic struggles faced by people across vast stretches of time, from Stone Age hunter-gatherers to 18th century laborers. He cites Gregory Clark's research on English wages, which reveals centuries of stagnation despite major historical events. Robert Allen's subsistence ratios show a similar trend globally, with many populations living at or near subsistence levels before 1800. Maddison's global GDP per capita data reinforces this picture, but also hints at a small growth rate from 1000 to 1800. Biological measures like life expectancy and height offer additional evidence of stagnation before a sharp increase around 1800. Susskind also references Richard Lee's studies of hunter-gatherer communities, which suggest that their living standards might have been comparable to, or even better than, those in the early 1800s. Lee's work challenges the Hobbesian view of hunter-gatherer life as nasty, brutish, and short. Chapter 2 explores the escape from the Malthusian trap. Susskind emphasizes that modern growth is a Kant question in economics, a deeply consequential puzzle. He criticizes grand narratives like Rostow's stages of economic growth for lacking substance. He then traces the evolution of mathematical growth models, starting with the Herod-Domar model, which emphasized capital investment. This model, however, proved flawed due to its knife-edge nature, where slight changes could lead to economic disaster. Solow and Swan's model introduced diminishing returns, arguing that sustained technological progress is the key to escaping the Malthusian trap. Lucas and Romer's work shifted the focus from tangible resources to intangible ideas, recognizing the non-rival nature of ideas and how their use and reuse can drive growth. Romer's work highlights the infinite potential of ideas, contrasting with the finite nature of physical resources. This chapter lays the groundwork for understanding why traditional views of limits to growth may be mistaken. Part 2 examines how growth became the dominant objective of economic policy. This shift, Susskind argues, was largely accidental. It began with the need to measure economic output during wartime, with figures like William Petty attempting to calculate national income during the 17th century. The creation of GDP in its modern form was driven by the Great Depression and World War II. Simon Kuznets's early work on national income provided crucial data during the Depression, but his reluctance to include military spending led to disagreements during the war. John Maynard Keynes, advocating for the inclusion of government spending, played a key role in shaping the final GDP measure. The Cold War further cemented growth's priority, as it became a metric for comparing economic systems. Part 2 continues with Chapter 4, highlighting growth's promises: poverty reduction, improved health and education, better work-life balance, and increased access to leisure and goods. Susskind cites data showing dramatic declines in extreme poverty since 1820, exceeding even the UN's Millennium Goals. He emphasizes the link between growth and improvements in health, education, leisure time, and access to goods like books and even light. He also addresses the Easterlin paradox, the observation that richer countries aren't necessarily happier, arguing that recent research suggests a more positive link between GDP and happiness. Furthermore, growth was seen as politically advantageous, offering a way to sidestep difficult trade-offs between competing social goals. Chapter 5 addresses the price of growth: environmental damage, inequality, work displacement, political disruption, and community erosion. It's important to note that Susskind links these challenges to the specific technologies we've chosen to develop. He points to the link between economic activity and climate change, particularly the rise in carbon emissions and global temperatures. He discusses rising inequality, both in wages and wealth, arguing that technology has played a role in exacerbating these trends. He explores the threat of automation to work, acknowledging the historical resilience of the labor market, but emphasizing the increasing power and pervasiveness of technology. He examines how technology is impacting political life through both code and the power of big tech, raising concerns about accountability. He also discusses globalization's role in disrupting communities and creating winners and losers. Part 3 explores alternative responses to the growth dilemma, beginning with Chapter 6 and a discussion of GDP minimalism. Susskind uses the analogy of the paperclip maximizer from AI research to illustrate the dangers of pursuing a single metric like GDP without considering its broader consequences. He details the technical limits of GDP, including difficulties in measuring services, quality improvements, the informal economy, and free digital goods. He also examines the moral limits of GDP, citing Kuznets's early concerns and the controversy surrounding the inclusion of illegal activities in GDP calculations. He proposes GDP minimalism, which involves moral modesty, technical diligence, and a dashboard approach that considers multiple measures of social progress alongside a more technically sound GDP measure. The dashboard approach emphasizes pluralism, recognizing the multiple values people hold, and incommensurability, acknowledging that these values can't always be reduced to a single metric. Chapter 7 examines the degrowth movement. Susskind traces its origins to figures like Nicholas Georgescu-Roegen and the Club of Rome's Limits to Growth report. He dissects the movement's arguments, distinguishing between the undesirable and infeasible nature of growth. He challenges the claim that infinite growth is not possible on a finite planet, arguing that the non-rivalrous nature of ideas makes sustained growth theoretically possible. He discusses the different interpretations of degrowth, including strong degrowth, and milder versions focusing on prioritizing other values. He criticizes strong degrowth for its negative consequences and milder versions for underestimating growth's potential. He concludes that while degrowth raises important concerns about the costs of growth, its proposed solutions are flawed, lacking both economic and political realism. Parts 4 and V set out Susskind's proposed solutions to the growth dilemma. In Chapter 8, he focuses on unleashing growth through liberating ideas, investing in R&D, including more people in the economy, and developing more technology. He highlights the importance of intellectual property reform, suggesting a use-it-or-lose-it rule for patents, increased funding for IP offices, and alternatives like prizes for innovation. He argues for increased R&D investment, criticizing current levels as insufficient, and emphasizes the need to improve research productivity, especially in the face of declining research productivity trends. He also stresses the importance of including more people in the economy, particularly through immigration, and addressing inequalities that limit opportunities. Finally, he champions the development of technologies that enhance research productivity or even automate the discovery of new ideas. Chapter 9 introduces the concept of directed technological change as a way to alter the nature of growth. He argues that rather than simply pursuing more or less growth, we can steer technological progress in directions that better align with our values. He uses examples like the Industrial Revolution and the COVID-19 pandemic to illustrate how incentives shape technological development. He points to the infinite wage incentive created by lockdowns, which led to rapid innovation in remote work technologies and vaccine development, but also accelerated automation in some sectors. He argues that we can use policy tools like taxes, subsidies, regulations, and social norms to influence the direction of technological change. Part 5 then addresses the big trade-offs presented by the growth dilemma. In Chapter 10, Susskind introduces the concept of trade-offs, drawing on Arthur Okun's Equality and Efficiency. He argues that, contrary to some hopes, growth doesn't eliminate trade-offs but creates new ones. He proposes 3 scenarios: avoiding the trade-off, weakening the trade-off, and accepting the trade-off. He discusses Pareto improvements, like increasing opportunity, which can lead to both more growth and less inequality. He then explores weakening trade-offs through directed technological change, using the example of the renewable energy revolution, which has weakened the trade-off between growth and the environment. He also discusses how we can weaken the trade-off between growth and a healthy labor market by influencing the direction of automation. Finally, he touches on the retreat from globalization and the digital's political impact as examples of how incentives can reshape the trade-offs we face. Chapter 11 focuses on the moral questions that arise when we accept trade-offs. Susskind argues that the pursuit of growth has led to the neglect of these moral questions, allowing social tensions and grievances to build. He identifies 2 key questions. What should we care about beyond growth, and how much should we care about the future? He introduces weak degrowth, a philosophy that prioritizes other values alongside rather than instead of growth. He discusses how this philosophy could reshape our approach to issues like climate change, inequality, and globalization. Regarding the future, he critiques long-termism, arguing that while we should care about the future, we must also acknowledge the limits of our ability to predict and influence the very distant future. He argues for imaginative humility and practical humility in our approach to the future. Finally, he proposes returning these moral questions to the realm of politics, advocating for new forms of collective deliberation like mini-publics. He cites examples like citizen assemblies in Ireland and Korea, arguing that these institutions can help citizens engage with complex moral trade-offs. He concludes by emphasizing the importance of giving citizens a greater voice in shaping the direction of technological progress and economic growth. Susskind ends by expressing two personal beliefs. First, he affirms a belief in humanity's innovative potential, arguing that we should adopt an attitude of resistance rather than resignation in the face of uncertainty. Second, he emphasizes the importance of treasuring the future, urging a longer-term perspective that balances the demands of the present with the needs of future generations. The main takeaways from Growth, A History and a Reckoning can be summarized as follows. Growth is a double-edged sword. While it offers immense potential for progress, it also comes with significant costs. We are not passive passengers. We can shape the direction of technological progress and the nature of growth through incentives and policies. The future is not predetermined. We must approach it with both imaginative and practical humility, recognizing the limits of our ability to predict and control long-term outcomes. Moral questions matter. We must explicitly confront the trade-offs presented by growth and engage in collective deliberation to determine what we value and how much we care about the future. To remember the core message, think of the following heuristics. The double-edged sword. Growth brings both benefits and costs. The steering wheel. We can direct technological change. The open sea. The future is uncertain but full of possibility. The public square. Moral questions require collective deliberation. Thanks for watching. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.